Hey everybody, welcome back to Pack Talk Podcast. This is episode number 61.
Ooh.
And I have a 2013 61 Minute Man sitting right in front of me.
Oh.
His name's Casey Stabile. We're honored to have him on the show today. Me and Casey go way back, so we're going to be catching up a little bit on the show. And also, we want to get into Casey's story. He's been through a lot of stuff. He's been in a lot of leadership positions. He currently owns 2 businesses that he's running, so we'll get into all that. But Casey, thanks for joining us. Glad to have you out here on the property, on the compound, undisclosed location.
Oh,
like
man.
we said earlier. Got to have the code to get
honored,
in here.
and slightly nervous.
So let's talk about where you grew up at, kind of how was your childhood growing up, because I want to think about how did that impact your life today. You know, some things that happened back then, maybe they impacted how you're operating today. But where'd you grow up and what was your childhood kind of like?
Oh, man. All right. We'll start from the beginning, the Genesis story.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a small town that no one's ever heard of called Stillwater, New Jersey. And this is the good part of New Jersey. So like farm boy, born and raised. My father it was kind of interesting. So like my father's family was more of like the blue collar-esque type of, roughneck kind of, upbringing. Mm-hmm. And my mom's side was a little more of the like hoity-toity, very well dressed. Everybody had nice jobs and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so we had a little known fact. My grandfather started a Wild West theme park called Wild West City in Byram, New Jersey. Yeah.
Really?
So he bought the farm so that we could feed all the animals at the park. And the Wild West City is a whole different story in and of itself. I didn't spend a tremendous amount of time there.
Did you work there when you were in your teenage years at all, or anything?
No. I was out of the fold for that. My role was on the farm, man.
Okay.
So what we had was like growing up, small town. Like my summers were helping dad. Like from we were 5 years old, just doing manual labor. So it's feeding the horses, feeding the chickens, taking care of the animals. Hay. There was a lot of doing hay. We had like 180 acres, and it would be like you'd wake up, like 7:30, 8 o'clock. And
when the sun comes up, you're up.
Oh, man. Well, I was like, Dad was already up doing his thing, and Mom was like, we're going to make you breakfast, and you're going to go help your father. And it was always like, how long were you to be doing that for? She's like, that's a good question. But
till the work's done.
That's exactly right. Like till probably the sun goes down, and then you'll do it again tomorrow. It'll be great.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I would say we that was like the farm was a major impact on my life because actually I know we're going to get into it eventually, but you'd go up there, and to any farmers out there who knows what it's like to go out and get, these are the square bales of hay. So you were always hoping that it was dry and never wet because that saved you an extra 20 pounds of force.
Yeah.
But you'd go in, and usually what would end up happening is we'd have a team going out and cutting and baling the hay. And then I would typically be waiting inside the barn to stack. And that was a very unpleasant experience for a 6-year-old, 7-year-old boy, because you got these bales of hay that basically weigh almost as much as you do.
Yeah.
And you have a bunch of older men trying to like be like, put the bale of hay on the elevator and get the next bale of hay and put it on the elevator. Like, I'm really tired. Like, it doesn't matter. It's like 110 degrees, 120 degrees if you get up in the haystacks. There's dust everywhere. There's shit in your lungs. Man, it was a lot of hard work. But one of the things that I remember I loved about it, Wild West City and where we live in Jersey isn't like the most affluent place in the world. So, a lot of blue collar guys, a lot of guys who are just like finding their way. And they'd always come and help us work. Yeah. And I always remember my father, because, we had some characters and some questionable individuals who did come work on the farm. I don't think anybody could debate that.
Yeah.
But I always remember Dad being like, you are to respect everybody, regardless of where they came from. You don't know their story, and they're helping you right now accomplish this mission that's helpful to all of us. And it was one of those things just in any team building exercise, any activity you guys are with, where the guy next to you or the girl next to you, it doesn't matter who they are, where they're from, what their beliefs are, they're there helping you accomplish this goal, and it's incredibly unpleasant. And it's like, it's unpleasant for you and it's unpleasant for them, but this person's not quitting and they're relying on you to not quit as well. And I would say that even more so than sports, that was probably the first part of my life where I was introduced to that idea, that concept of teamwork and that concept of it's going to be painful, but it's not going to kill you.
Yeah.
And there's like a unique level of purity in manual labor and doing going down and literally shoveling shit.
Yeah.
And, you go down during the wintertime. My bus stop the barn was between my bus stop and my house. And so I remember during the winter times, we would go and, like 5, 6, 7 years old. And you're like, you walk, you're like 100 yards and then there's the barn door and the barn door's open, which means come on in. Right. And so you'd go and you'd learn, you're like a little kid and it's like, okay, well the switch for the elevator's over here. So I need to go and get a couple boxes, stand on the boxes, turn on the elevator and go through with these giant horses and like push the shit in the elevator. And then your job is done. You can go home and enjoy the rest of your day. And it's like, yeah, man, it was an interesting childhood.
Yeah.
It was cool for a lot of different reasons.
Well, I feel like that probably builds some resiliency in you physically and mentally.
Oh man,
right,
for
which
sure.
definitely paid off later, and then also bonds you to the people you're working with, and just matures you faster than like a normal. I don't want to say normal, but like someone that's not doing that type of physical work. At that level. At least that's what I feel like.
I definitely agree with that, man, and I'd say that it's actually one of my goals is that I hope to either own a farm or live close enough to a farm where I can send my kids to go work on a farm specifically for it. It's I don't know, man. It's a unique experience. It's one of those things where it's just God, I'm going to quote my dad again, which is going to be it's going to be painful. The fact that I'm doing this because I'm like, he wasn't right, but if there's a job worth doing, there's a job worth doing well.
Yeah.
And there's something that, again, it's like the physical, there's purity in the struggle. There's purity in the physical labor and like just that mindset of it's like, look, I don't need a lot of things to be happy. And I don't need a big car or a big house or whatever. It's like, I need something that sustains me and I need something that's purposeful and I want to feel like I've got some sort of accomplishment. And yeah, man, there's a lot of things that's packed into just manual labor in and of itself, not just farm work. I appreciate it, the tending to the land, tending to the animals. And like, there's something that I miss from my current career now where it's like, you can go through and you can cut, your block of hay for the day and you can be like, oh yeah, I did some work. Like I was out here for 8 hours on that tractor and like got some sunburn, but I see what I've got done and like, I can be proud of that work for sure. And it's like very, it's very tangible. You're like, that's going to feed people and animals.
Yeah.
Like I can be very proud of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, man,
What was your favorite animal to work with on the farm? Was it the chickens?
Oh my God, definitely not the chickens. Honestly, oh God, dude.
I showed you my chickens when you first walked
You're
up.
far better mannered than mine, dude. Chickens are real bastards sometimes. I have this one memory. So I'm like 4 or 5 years old, real little, and it's one of those days where I don't even think I was coming home from school. I was just I was coming down and I'm like, I forget the character's name, but I'm like waddling in my little snowsuit or whatever. I get inside the barn and my brother and father both have a different memory of how this happened. But I go and I'm like trying to help dad. I'm trying to help my dad and my brother, basically just tend to the horses right now.
Yeah.
And I get pecked on the side and then I like try to defend myself and I fall. Okay. And so, and like it's a rooster, and the rooster's like gonna come and murder me. And what I remember, my brother says it was him, but I remember my dad we had these big plows to shovel the horse shit into the elevator to get it out of the barn. Yeah. And I remember my dad comes up, and he just spears this chicken with this, and I was like, "Get out of here, you son of a bitch!" And he kills the chicken.
Oh God!
No, and I was just like, "Oh my God!" I was like, "Wow, this is really a tense situation for everybody involved right now." I'm maybe too young to be here doing this. So no, not the chickens. My favorite animals to work with, man, probably goats.
Goats?
Goats are the sheep.
Huh?
I like that. So the thing is, I would say horses, but I was too young to. Like my ability to ride horses is at a novice level at best. I enjoyed the horses, but I was too young to be able to, I would say, appreciate them. The goats I just found to be very entertaining, man. Those things.
Yeah. So, they're a little crazy, bro.
Yeah, they're a little crazy. You could get them. We ended up having a blind goat. We had this blind goat at one point in time,
gosh.
and he would just he would run spearhead into things, and it would be, you'd feel terrible for laughing, but you'd sit there, because he'd hear you, and you'd do like, he'd be like in his cage trying to, feed him. You see him like kicking, and it's like, oh, it's like relax, 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 and then you'd move out of the way, and then he'd just run right into the wall. And you're like, oh, Billy, I forget what his name is, but yeah, the goats and the sheep were always pretty nice, man. They were very docile. Like, the chickens were definitely the worst. Chickens were definitely
Not a
the
fan
worst.
of chickens.
Nah, my chickens.
Did you guys milk the goats, or were they just
no,
brush hogging for you guys? Or
they were a petting zoo. Their petting zoo was
okay.
mostly their function. So we had like an assortment. I like the rabbits too. A lot of the.
Oh, you guys had rabbits.
Oh yeah, we had rabbits. Were cool. The problem with the rabbits kept getting eaten.
Oh my god! Yes. Coyotes or foxes?
And foxes alike, man. So it was was like another part of the farm life that was, again, I was probably a little too young to appreciate this version of the farm, but like
fighting the predators.
That's exactly right. Defending the homestead, man. Defending the homestead.
Oh yeah. They still have that farm in your family?
No, the farm ended up, there was a bit of a fallout between when my grandfather passed away when I was like 2. So I don't really remember grandpa too much. My grandma passed away, so everything got passed to grandma. And it was like it was a family business. And grandma ended up, so there was a bunch of different personalities in the family. And there were a lot of, what's a good way of saying it? Everybody had a different viewpoint of how things should have been run. And then everybody was also a different level of commitment to the farm. And I say the farm, but Wild West City is included in this. And so my oldest, so there were 6 kids in the family. There was, my father was number 4. He was number 4. So there was like a block of kids who got, probably within a year or 2 of each. It was more like the planned family. And then there's a gap between him and his other sister. I think it's Aunt Carol is the oldest.
Surprise action.
She was the surprise, and so like, well, she needs a friend. So there's so exactly. So there's like the 2 younger ones and the 4 older ones. But my Uncle Mike was the oldest. He like came back and had my grandfather had this, from what I'm aware of, like a very Italian. Very Italian, like you must honor your father and come and work for me forever kind of deal. And Uncle Mike was like, all right, I'm in. My Uncle Ed is just a strange cat in general. He's just a weird guy, dude. There's not much to talk about him. He's got some another podcast. Podcast. Aunt Sharon, she went out and married a lawyer and was like, this seems way better than doing farm work all the time. And Dad was interested in being a pilot. And so I'm getting everything, passed down to me. But he had this, we'll call it a disagreement. I'll have this disagreement with my grandfather about, I want to say it was his hair. It was either his hair or facial hair. It was one of the two, but it was hair. And so I'll give you I'll try and give you the context of the lay of the land. Dad was going to college at this time. It's where he met my mom. And he was hitchhiking to college. Didn't have a car, so he hitchhiked from Byram, New Jersey, out to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania during the week.
Holy cow!
So it's like a 2-hour commitment one way. He would do his classes for 5 days, and then he'd hitchhike back. And then he'd work the farm in the evenings and or on the weekends, and that's basically his rotation. He also at the time held the world title for youngest bullwhip artist in the world. So we have some videos of him, man, where you can go out and you'd have a cigarette in your mouth and you could whip the cigarette out of your mouth. And
dang,
he's got a bunch of
holy smokes,
and
dude.
He can still do it too, which is the impressive part. Old man, he's 69 right now, baby. He can. It's like he bullwhips.
You don't lose that
weapons.
skill set.
Seriously, it's really impressive and slightly terrifying. But so Dad and Grandpa have this, kind of like coming to Jesus meeting, we'll say, and Dad's like, all right, well, I'm rolling out and I'm headed to California and I'm going to be a Western action star. Dang. That's what I'm going to do. So he picks up, hitchhikes out to California, and he's there for like a month, and he's like, all right, maybe not an actor, I'll come back. And so he kind of redefines his strategy, how he wants to work, and he's like, I want to come and be a pilot. I don't want to live here forever. I don't think this is for me. And I would say that was kind of like the first division, because I think my Uncle Mike was like, hey, we're in this together and we're going to inherit this thing, blah, 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 blah. And Dad's like, nah, I don't want to, I want to do something else. And from that, grandpa and grandma respected, because he's like, all right, well, you're pursuing your dream, and like you had enough cojones to be able to kind of stand up to me and forge your own way.
Yeah.
And grandpa, World War II vet, Pearl Harbor vet, like, yeah,
Intense.
hard man, dude. He went over to the invasion of Saipan, and he did some dirty things.
Yeah.
And grandpa's like a guy who's like first generation immigrant, like just figuring it out, and was very, very clever of the ability to make a lot out of something with nothing. And so that, I think my dad, that got passed on to him, and he really liked the idea of doing that. And so he's like, yeah, I want to fly. I want to become a pilot.
Yeah.
And so that from there was, like I said, kind of a division in the family, because it was no longer like, well, what about the family business? Like, well, I'll work on the farm and I'll do the farming portion of things, and you guys can run Wild West City, and we can work together that way.
Gotcha.
And so as that went on throughout the years, there was like, more and more, Dad was getting higher and higher in his career and doing better and better. And you can only do so well with the Western theme park, as you might imagine, especially in Byram, New Jersey. And so, yeah, it's like, that's a tough career choice to be making, to be a permanent cowboy. But so that ended up happening. And my one aunt, she's a professor. She decided to go and be a professor and kind of leave the theme park life to the other kids. She worked it when she was a teenager, but she left. And then the youngest one, my Aunt Mary, she decided to kind of like link up with my Uncle Mike, and they really
continue it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what age did you leave the farm? Was that when you went to college, or was it?
Yeah. Well,
so that's when you actually.
So I was gonna say, when Grandma passed away, I was like 8 or 9. I would say a lot of family tension kind of imploded in on itself, and they were not so thrilled with my father. And it was interesting, man. I learned. I am very grateful for my father in a lot of different ways, and I feel as though he's had to. I've learned a lot of lessons at his expense, for lack of a better term, and some of his own doing, and some of his just bad luck.
Yeah.
But his grandma was like, "Look, you should take the farm, and because when I die, I don't think things are going to go great." And Dad's like, "Look, I don't want to cause any problems. Like, let's just let's divide everything up between the kids."
Yeah.
And like, I don't want to I would rather have a family kind of deal.
Right.
So Grandma passes away, and then they're like, we're selling the farm. And it's like, whoa. We live on the farm. Like, we'll buy it from you.
Yeah.
Like, we'll put a down payment on, work to pay it off. And they're like, nope, we're not selling it to you.
What?
So there was like the first, like, it was my first introduction as a kid to be like, oh, so family is more than just like, it's, you don't just get a family. You build one. Yeah. Well, you build one and you work one, and you decide there's a certain level of decision as to who's in your family and how you work it. And this is all between the siblings. Like the cousins, we get along famously. And actually, none of my aunts or uncles have ever been rude or mean to me.
Yeah.
And so I have like we're not close, but I don't have any ill will towards them.
Yeah. How old were you when this was all going down?
This started.
Grandma died?
So Grandma passed away when I was 8.
Okay.
I want to say 8 or 9. And so this started like basically directly after that. And they were in a lawsuit for
a while.
Like 15 years. It was like a whole big thing. It was rough. Yeah. So, and then it got very vitriolic, and like, Dad doesn't talk to his siblings anymore, except for he talks to one. And I think as we're getting older and things have changed, the majority of my father's siblings have kind of come around and been like, all right, like, you know, maybe I shouldn't have. And kind of, my dad's like, look, that's nice, but the things that you have done, they can't be rectified. Like, let's just end the lawsuit and let's go about our ways.
Yeah.
So that was actually another really hard part of growing up, man. Because when we were young, we used to have, we had this big long street, and probably like a mile long, and we had a bunch of kids around the same age. And we'd always have kids we'd always have parties, or we'd have like during the winter time, we had like probably 3 or 4 of these like really great hills.
Yeah.
And you'd go down and you just spend all day out with your friends. You were like praying for a snow day.
Yeah.
And when the farm got sold, it was really strange because, you'd go around and you're like, I used to be here all the time. Like, it's like going to my backyard. They're like, that's not your backyard anymore, man. That's on the lot. And then when it's not on the lot, somebody else owns it. And I remember they came in, and this is like 2000 and like 2003, I'm thinking. They were gonna do these housing developments. So we have our. I want you to think we've got our like big open field farm.
Yeah.
And we had at the time, my dad was doing a gravel pit business, so he's basically digging in, getting soil, selling soil.
Yeah.
They closed all that up, and they put in these 2 big roads. So where they were going to like basically make cul-de-sacs. So they put in the driveways.
Yep.
And then it might have been closer to 2000. Yeah, maybe 7, 8, because there was the recession happened. The housing market popped, and everything just drove down to the floor. And I remember, so now it was kind of cool because I'm like, instead of walking through the field, I can walk on this pavement to get to to the back of the field and everything like that. You're like, that's pretty cool. But it was one of those things where you're like, yeah, man, this isn't mine anymore. Like, and that was really strange. We used to, as I'm thinking now, like during the summers, we'd go down. We'd have this one specific river, which was a really magical time growing up, man. That's where you'd bring the girl you thought was cute down there, and you're like, oh man, maybe we're gonna get to go swimming. Like maybe I'll get to snag a kiss. That's exactly right, dude. You're like, we'll see what we can pull off here, baby. But like everybody kind of liked it, and there was always fishermen there, but the fishermen were always like, oh, I know who you are.
Yeah.
And
everybody knows everybody.
Dude, small town mentality, which I do miss that in my adult years. I would say I've had less of that, and it's sad in a certain sense. I think I'd like to raise a family in that kind of culture, but in any event, it was really hard to this thing that you had your entire life to let go of. And it just seemed like we were talking earlier, it's part of your character. And another part of my life, we were sitting back and be like, all right, well, who are you? And does being a farm boy define you? And at that point in time, you're like, yeah, like that really does. Soccer was like a big part of my life, but it's like soccer, had my friends, like there's certain like things that I was interested in, but like farming was a huge part of your life just because it took off. Like
that's what
you're
did.
Consistently needed. Yeah, exactly.
That's what you did from the time you popped out up until that point, right?
Chad, I'll tell you right now. Here's one of the saddest moments is that. So I was like getting like 13, 14 is where we did our like last hay. I think it was 13. It was the last time we did hay.
Yeah.
And I remember as soon as we got done, the next summer came around, and my mom they got we used to have the farm like right up to my lawn, because once you cut the hay, it was basically just a giant lawn.
Yeah.
And so mom's like, all right, we need to go and expand the yard to the property lines. And I was like, okay. And she's like, okay, here you are. And she gave me a ride-on lawn tractor. I'm like, what's this? And she's like, that's your new tractor. And I was like, this is the new tractor? I was like, what happened to the
real
big
tractor?
One? Yeah, the real tractors. And she's just like, we don't need those anymore. And I was just like, shit.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, man, it was sad. It was one of those times where you're like, all right, well, things change, times change. But like, it was a really... I'm glad you're bringing this up, man, because it's a really surreal moment, and I don't think it's one of those ones you don't really think about until you're asked about.
Yeah.
But like, that was a really strange moment in time where it's like, okay, you're not this thing anymore. You're something else. Like, and what do you want to be?
Yeah.
And I'd say that was probably like I started leaning more into athletics after that. I really started focusing on. So here's a little fun fact. As of growing up, I was a larger child, we'll say.
Were you really?
Oh, yeah, dude.
You weren't the mean, lean, athletic Casey Stabile I know?
Oh, dude, no. I was a very gentle, soft. I was like Bobby Hill, dude. I was Bobby Hill from King of the Hill. I was this nice little plump child who was just rosy red cheek, bleached blonde hair, actually.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And so
soccer player, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, so I remember I got, I forget. It was interesting. Like elementary school, just in general was something where I'm like, meh, elementary school is all right. And then junior high sucked. I was not a fan of junior high, not for any particular reason, but I just remember being there and just feeling like awkward and I just didn't enjoy it. I didn't have a great time, but I remember I was like in 8th grade, and it was like right before my growth spurt, and everybody's literally at that point in time measuring dicks. And so you're like, okay, you're like, how many pubes you got? You got like 4 pubes? All right, yeah, well, I got like 9. So I'm more of a man than you now, for sure. Yeah, dude, it was like, everybody's in the locker room, like, trying not to look at each other. And it's like, okay, shh. Yeah, don't let them know, dude. Don't let them know.
Yeah.
And I remember I went and I did So I tried football for the first time when I was in 7th grade because everybody was like, you should be a football player. And I tried
Everybody
it.
wants you to do that.
Yeah.
If you're a dude, everyone wants you to play football, you know?
Football and wrestling, man.
Yeah.
And I didn't do wrestling when I was younger. I was introduced to wrestling when I was in elementary school. And it wasn't for me because I like I said, man, I was soft.
Yeah.
I was definitely a soft child and like nice and gentle, but nice and gentle. And the grade above me they were savages. They were really good athletes, but they were definitely not the nicest of crews that you could be hanging out with. So if you're there, you better be right there to play. And I'm like, I don't want to get beat up by a bunch of assholes. I'll just go play soccer. It's way more collaborative. And so anyways, I get up and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to junior high. We went to a new school at that point. I'm like, all right, I'm going to try football. I went to the first practice. And I don't know what I was thinking, but I'm like, yeah, maybe we'll be quarterback or maybe we'll be like a wide receiver. We'll get to touch the ball at some point. They're like, you're going to be on the line. And not only you're going to be on the line, we have a bunch of kids who are way bigger than you. You are going to be like third string on the line. I'm like, so I'm going to get to play 2 plays a game and cheer for the rest of the season. And like, that's basically it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, football's not for me.
Yeah.
8th grade went back to soccer. And I remember going to the varsity coach at the end of my 8th grade year and was like, hey, sir, this guy named PT Martini. Who I do like, PT Martini. He was definitely, he's a guidance counselor now, and I'm like, you should not have made that man a guidance counselor. He was definitely there's a lot of emotional abuse that went into the training camps. But I remember I was like, what do I need to do in order to make varsity? I'd like to try and do that. And he's like, he like looks at me, he's like, you need to lose some weight. And he's like, you need to get way faster than what you are right now. And I was like, all right. And like, I took it really seriously. Yeah. And I remember, so I went to, we had our freshman like tryout, whatever it was, and I got like a 7:30 on the mile, and I was like, shit, that's not so good, because
that's pretty good.
Well, I was
that's what you think. Anyway.
Well, it was like for a big guy, you're like good enough to. But I remember I go there and I'm kind of like, all right, how am I going to do, man? Like I know 7:30 is not so great, but like that's what the coach said I need to work on. Like, maybe I'll sit varsity, but like probably JV. And it's like freshman. You will be on the freshman team. And I was like, freshman team? I was like, oh, that's bullshit. And I was like, I don't like that at all. And it was like, you need to get faster and you need to get better at the game. Yeah. And so it was like another humbling moment in my life where it was like, look, man, you're not as good as you think you are. And there's people who've put in way more time than you have. And I was like, okay. Like, all right, let me see what I can do here. Yeah. And I remember like for the freshman, for being at the freshman, it's like I was good for a freshman. Yeah. And the next year came around, and I remember I was like, okay, I'm going to take this really seriously now. Now I'm going to get fast. Yeah. Now I'm going to really work on my time. And so I remember I took it from a 7:30. This is like my sophomore year. I took it from a 7:30 to like a 6:15. Dang. And I was like, all right, I'm fast. That's now. A big deal. Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, I'm ready to go. Yeah. And so I go in there, and they're like, all right, you're going to start for JV. And I was like, what do you mean I'm going to start for JV? I'm like, I'm definitely better than some of those guys. Like, yeah, they're seniors, but we can't have seniors on JV. So I was there, and I was like, man, like I don't like where I'm at. And I'm like, why am I here? And this is probably like one of the, like athletics in general is something that I would definitely encourage any kid to do in perpetuity, just because it's not about playing the game. It's about like what skills are you learning, what levels of cohesion are you learning. Like it's one of the things I liked about soccer is that I'm just going to pick on football right now because that's what we were just talking about. But footballs are a lot of set plays, and then within inside the set plays, then it becomes dynamic once the ball is once the play is set in motion. Right. Soccer is just one giant dynamic game for 90 minutes, and you're consistently moving, and there's like a loose framework that you work within, but it's like, hey man, however you get the ball inside the net, and like you have to be able to rely on every one of your teammates. Like there's not a person on the field where the play didn't go well, and it's like, all right, well, we can reconvene, and we only lost a couple of yards. It's like, well, if that guy didn't do well, it's like he's now a deficient player, and you're playing 10v11 as opposed to 11v11. Yeah. And it was one of those ones where you really started to realize how much you relied on your teammates. And again, it's just a game where I was thinking at that point in time just about soccer, but that is a pattern that I've seen across life, at least thus far in my journey. So you're saying that probably impacted your ability to work with the team, right? Yeah, but man. It began back then.
with soccer, for example, right?
And
on the farm, helping with the hay, moving the hay around, so it all is compounding up to this point, right?
That's exactly right, man.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you right now, one of the other things that I learned while we were doing that, because I think due to more of just my size rather than my demeanor. My demeanor is something that I've grown towards, and like when we got to the Citadel, that's really when I was able to start kind of like being like, oh, I can be this guy, as opposed to like, everybody thinks that you're big when you're younger, you're just like this strong, dominant character. It's like, no. I know a lot of really big guys who are very timid and very like. You ever see the the villain where there's always like the small, short villain and like the big, dumb guy? It's like, it's kind of like that, where it's like you can be mean and be dominant.
Yeah.
But it was one of the places, this JV, JV experience. I think I got pulled up for 1 or 2 games of varsity, but never played my junior or my sophomore year. And that really, really irked me, because I'm like, I'm here, I'm very valuable on this team, and like, what's the deal? And it's like, you're just like, the hard facts are, it's like, you're just not as good as some of the guys. Like, technically, you're technically not as good as them.
Yeah.
And it was this idea where it's like, but I'm like a leader on this team. Like, shouldn't the leader be able? And it's like, well, there's a couple things here. It's like, one, you're a leader at this level of resolution.
Yeah.
Going to varsity is another level of resolution.
Right.
And there's the other part of being like, look, the people who are put in position of powers or leadership positions, in addition to having the skill set of willing to stand in front and willing to make calls and willing to be responsible and all the risk taking that goes along with being a leader, is you have to be competent. You have to be good at what you're doing. And that was one of those things when I was younger. It was kind of like, it's unfair that this is the way things are. It's like, it's unfair, but it is the way that things are, and you do get a choice. But you can complain about it, or you can work to fix it. But nobody's going to work to fix it for you, was kind of the idea. So it was like, okay, we're going to do this again.
Yeah.
We're going to go through, and it's going to be junior year of high school. It's like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to work hard, and I'm going to see what I can do. And so I brought my mile time from 6:15 to a 5:30. And I'm like, all right, like, I'm fast now, and I'm ready. And I remember we always had a soccer camp before the season. It was always in July. We went this in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And I remember we're getting out, and we the first like 2 days, or the first like 2 sessions, are just like, practices and scrimmages with inside the team and whatnot. And I remember D Martini, the coach, he's like, all right, Stabile, you're getting out there. You're going to left back. And I'm like, oh, he called my name. I was like, oh shit. And it was like, this is like a job interview, man. It's like, you better perform here.
Yeah.
And I remember went out, and it was like, just do your job. Like, just like that. You don't have to do anything more. You don't have to be superstar. You got to be part of the team. You have to be reliable, and you have to be consistent, and the rest of it's going to work itself out.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a good buddy of mine who was like, so, there's soccer formation, but usually the weaker players on the outside and the stronger players on the inside. And so I, at this, stage in my career, I was on the left wing, and I had a really good sweeper. It's like the last guy before the goalie.
Yeah.
And I had an excellent sweeper, super fast, was able to complement me really well. And he was very, like, when we were on the field, it was actually really good preparation, honestly, for the academy, where it's like, you tell me where to go, and I'm going to go there with the greatest amount of accuracy that I can. And, and he's like, okay, look, if I can use you when I need to use you, and then you are going to execute when I tell you to execute, like, we're going to work well together.
Yeah.
And we worked really well together.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that was like, I don't know, another shift in our in my mindset, I guess, in terms of like, okay, like, this is a system that can work effectively, and like, if you have somebody who's competent and you can trust them, like, what's a good way of describing it? It just opened me up to. I hadn't had a system in my life up to that point that had worked as efficiently as myself and this guy Pat Spalding.
Yeah.
And I still see Pat to this day.
Nice.
We haven't got a chance to play soccer in a while. He
I
probably smoked me. But yeah, man, that was really interesting. So I go up and I get my first shot up there, and I just was like, listen, don't be a hero. Just go in and play your role.
Yeah.
Went in, played my role, and it's like, all right, secured my spot on the team. We did well that year, and it was that I would say, soccer's like a definitive portion of my youth growing up.
Yeah.
So transfer to senior year. So we had my sophomore year, the soccer team did the best the soccer team ever did. We were, I think, in the semifinals or finals. I think semifinals of states, something like that. Our team was not very good. We're a school of, I graduated with 180 people. I think we were a school of like 1,200 in total. So small little town in Jersey.
Yeah.
My year, we went to the quarterfinals, I think, of states, and we ended up losing. And so then my senior year is there, and I'm like, all right, here we go. Like, we lost a couple people, but we're getting some talent coming up.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, captain, and I'm like ready to go. I had one of my best friends at the time who was like, he got pulled up sophomore year and was like kind of on the he was like mostly JV our freshman year and like kind of varsity also our freshman year.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, good. Well, we've got Paul and like we've got the rest of us. We're ready to go. We're gonna have a great year.
Yeah.
And Paul breaks his ankle.
Oh my god.
Yeah, dude, he breaks his ankle in like March of our junior year, getting ready for senior year. We're like, okay, well there'll be time for it to heal and whatnot. And he was taking it to where he was gonna try and do something with it. Like he was gonna go to a D1 school, play for the D1 team, and see if he could,
Yeah.
I don't know if he was going to be able to make it professionally, but he definitely would have played at the D1 school very competitively.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we lost our star player, and I'm like, okay, well, we're going to figure this out.
Yeah.
And so we go, and we had a kind of a crew of misfits, man. It's similar to Oscar in a certain sense, where it's like outside of this thing that binds us together, we probably wouldn't have too many common interests, if you know what I mean. And so that was the soccer team, at least when I was a freshman, sophomore, junior, we were all kind of in the same social groups. We were interested in the same things. But my senior year, that wasn't really the case. It was just a different crew of people who were interested in playing.
Yeah, you're on the team, on the field as a team, but outside of that, you guys had your own things going on.
Yeah,
your own walks of life and all that,
And you're like doing your best to bring people in together, and but it was just different temperaments and people. Like I said, people were just interested in different things.
Yeah.
And so we go and we play, and we get crushed, dude. My senior year, we just get murdered.
Yeah.
And I remember just sitting there. I remember going, and we had some kids who were kind of like, well, they were future juvenile hall residents, we'll say. So they were definitely, they were into some not so great things, and they were ready to have fights, and they were ready to do this, and they were ready to do that.
Yeah.
And it was like the first time in like a leadership position, because I remember I was going and like we had a game where like the team just collapsed in on itself. People were fighting with each other, and I'm like, I remember at the end of the session, everybody's getting into their car, and I go into the coach's office, and I'm talking with Demar and the other coaches, and I'm like, Demar, I don't know what to do, man. Like, these guys don't want to work. These guys don't want to play. Like, I know you can't do anything. I'm not mad at you, but I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And he's just like, look, man, some years are rebuilding years. He's like, now's a rebuilding year. And he's like, and this is a job for you. He's like, I can give you he's like, I can support you and I can help direct you. But it's like, your job is to go out and to get these people to work together because like I'm the coach. I've got my own responsibilities, but like, it's not my senior year. It's your senior year. And there's a lot of like, this is coming from a guy, Demar, who's our age now, right? He would have been 31 when I was 17, like having the same conversation. And one of the things he used to love to do was Saturdays we'd play indoor soccer instead of going outside. Yeah. And Demar loved to play. Yeah. And it's like, oh, who would want to go around and just mess up some 17-year-olds? And he would come we'd play full contact indoor soccer. And when I mean full contact,
football, soccer.
Football. That is exactly right, Chad. Football, soccer. I remember we had one specific practice where the ball would get into the corner of the gym and two people went in there and then they just started fighting. They were like the ball was even there anymore. And then we had three other people go in and just start fighting, and they would just have like wrestling matches. And you're just like,
soccer was just an outlet for the
aggression, dude. That's exactly right. And Demar was the worst perpetrator of it, dude. This guy's 31, a fully developed man, against these kids who was playing. He would just come up and be like, and just throw
got
him
a lot
into
of
the
things to work through.
Oh
yeah,
dude, he's like, this is my therapy too.
Yeah.
That's how I became a counselor. He's like,
Yeah.
I worked a lot of things out on the field. But it was interesting to hear it from D-Mark, because D-Mark was kind of a soft-spoken guy, and like, and yeah, man, I remember listening to that. I was like, you know what, you're right. I was like, there's, and the reason why I'm bringing all this up is because it was the lesson that I was learning from this is that you can learn a lot from the struggle, and you can learn a lot from failure, and a lot of things. The most you're going to learn is from failure. You're not going to learn a lot from success. The only thing you're going to learn from success is which pattern to repeat.
Yeah.
But the failure is where it's like, okay, so what's going wrong, and how can I salvage this catastrophe? Because I've made the commitment that I love the sport, love the team. I'm not leaving.
Yeah.
And by virtue of that being the reality or the frame that I've set, that means that I can either make it a terrible experience, or I can make it as best an experience that I can manage. And we definitely we disrupted a lot of teams that year. We did not, we didn't go anywhere ourselves necessarily.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, man, like by the end of it, we took I think the number 1 seed team, and we beat the number 1 seed team in the last game of the season.
Nice.
Before, which was something that was, we were, I'm sure just being an athlete yourself, where you're like, you know what the other districts are saying about you.
Oh, yeah.
You know the news. You have friends who have girlfriends from this school or that school come back and like, oh yeah, you guys suck. And you're like, yeah, we do. That's how it goes right now. We're in a rebuilding year. Okay, we're consolidating.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I so finished the season, and then I was kind of like, what am I gonna do? Like I the next big thing was college.
Yeah.
And I hadn't gotten into. I don't know if I might have been academically accepted. I don't know. I'm not sure if I was in. I don't remember specifically when I got in to the Citadel.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how'd you end up choosing the Citadel? Because you're from New Jersey, right? You're way up there.
Oh, all
right. Citadel's way down in South Carolina. Southern Boys School.
Southern Boys School, dude,
right?
which in and of itself had its own. I had my own boogeyman, my own Southern boogeyman. I was talking to Phyllis about this last night. But so how I got into it was my brother went to a military academy called Norwich University up in Vermont.
That's right. I remember you telling me about that.
And he's like, you need to come up. So he brought me up when he was a senior, and he was a company commander. So it was like, I was getting the rose-colored glasses.
Oh,
you do this. This is awesome.
Yeah.
People just listen to you. Like, that's crazy. And I remember I went up with him. And I know you don't know Jim very well, but Jim has one of his guys pick me up from the airport because he's in class. And I come and I stay with him, and I'm like, 16 at a military academy.
You're staying in his room with him?
Yeah.
That's
and
cool.
Might as well just be, you're walking around a military academy. And I don't know if you remember the first time you're there, but I remember being terrified where I'm like, dude, what if someone just comes up and starts yelling at me? And it's like, what do I do? It's like, you probably just listen to him. Start pushing. It's like, all right, deal. Yeah. And so... Anyway, so I'm there and like really uncomfortable about just being around everybody. I'm like, dude, this is nuts. Like I love the atmosphere. I was just there, and you could feel the discipline and honestly kind of the aggression. But I'm like, I like this. It's like a competitive, competitive environment.
Speaking to the athlete in you.
Oh, for sure, dude, 110%. And so I'm in there, and of course, my brother's up at he's up at 05, and I'm passed out. And he leaves, and I wake up probably like 8, and he's not around. And
oh,
like,
8 o'clock, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. It's like, well, at that point in time, I was just a wee 16-year-old dude. I didn't know what it was like to be up having to do stuff. So I'm up. It's like 8 o'clock. I'm like, where do I go? What do I do? And then I hear us banging on a door, and I'm like, oh, it must be my brother. He lost his keys. So I open up the door, and I just see this mountain of a man. This guy by the name of Mike Rivet, who is one of the greatest guys that I know of to this date. But it's like the first encounter with him, and he's like, "You Stabile's brother?" And I was like, yes. And he's like, "Come on, you're coming with me." And I was like, oh, am I getting abducted? Like, this guy is huge, and I'm just gonna listen to him. And so he brought me down to a couple of my other brothers. They call them Rook brothers, our classmates, but his core group of buddies. And I spent probably like 3 or 4 hours with these guys that I'd never met before. And I just remember being like, I don't know why it's like, I know my brother's friends from high school and they're great. These guys are different, and I don't understand why the relationship is different, but these guys feel like my brothers, and that's, I'm not even trying to be facetious. Like, I remember them going around and feeling completely at ease, and like, they're just good dudes, and like, listen, you're one of our brothers, you're a brother of our brother, that you're in the crew. Yeah. And I'm like, I want friends like that. Yeah. Those are the people that I want to surround myself with. Yeah. And I remember I was sitting there and I was kind of like, I want to do this. Like, this seems like, for me, I'll get to choose, but I'll get exposed to the military environment at that point in time. Like, not sure if I want to, Marines or Army. Marines or Army were kind of like the idea at that point in my life. And I'm like, all right, well, I don't really want to go to Vermont for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons not to go to Vermont. I'm like, this seems like it sucks. And my brother's XO's brother, he was a sophomore at the Citadel at the time.
Oh, okay.
And so
you
like,
had a connection,
right? And he's like, look, like, my brother's down there. You should go and check it out. And I was like, all right. So I remember my junior year, I was like, hey, I think I want to go to the Citadel. And my mom was like, oh, I don't know if I want you to do that. And I'm like, not your choice. So we should go and check it out. And so she brings me down. And I remember,
you do a pre-knob, or you just going?
This is before the pre-knob. So I go in.
So you and her just kind of walking around.
Yeah. So we had I don't even know. I think we had a tour. We might have had a tour. But I remember we go to the admissions office. We're in Bond Hall, and I remember as we're driving around, Mom, before we get to the Bond Hall, Mom's like, this place looks like a prison. And I was like, you could have said castles, but it also does look like a prison. I can see how you could mistake the two. Yeah. But I remember we get into Bond Hall and we sit down, and I'm like, dude, I'm so motivated at this point. I'm like, this is, dude, I'm here.
You're like, I'll just stay here.
Right. I was like, can I just pick up second semester and we'll just keep riding this thing through? Yeah. And so I go, and I remember I like fell in love with it. And I remember, speaking of, so here's this is my first time in the South. This is my first time in Charleston.
What time of year is this?
It was warm. It had to have been probably September, October.
So it wasn't middle of the summer.
Right. Yeah.
So you didn't
I didn't know about the heat, dude. I found out. We'll get to matriculate. We'll get to Hell Week in a second, because this past week has been I've been reminiscing about how much I'm happy that I don't have to go to Hell Week the next week. So we get down, and I remember we're walking down the streets of Charleston, just trying to find a place to eat, and we see Sticky Fingers. And we're like, classic. Oh, that looks, right, classic. So I'm like, oh, okay. And we're walking up, and as we're walking up, there's this guy coming down. It's on Meeting Street, and the guy's coming down Meeting Street, and he's like looking at me. He's like, hey, Bo, how you doing? And I was like, do you like want something from me, or like I'm fine? Why? Yeah. And he's like, I'm just asking, man. I'm just like, wait, so like you guys just ask how people are doing down here because you're generally interested? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, this is way better than the North. Dude, up there, it's like, are you gonna mug me? Is that how this works? Like, never. If somebody's asking you for how you're doing in New York City, be on your guard.
Not a good idea.
Not a good place to tell people about divulging information. Yeah. But yeah, so anyway, we go there. I'm like, I love the South. This is great. I'm pretty sure this is where I want to go. So next, it must have been next year. I don't necessarily know when, but sometime in my senior year, where it's like, I'm going to go down to do a pre-knob. And I did a pre-knob, and I pre-knobbed in Hotel.
Oh, Hell Hotel.
Hell Hotel, dude. I pre-knobbed in Hell Hotel, and I was with this guy. I forget what his name was. But I remember we just went through. And I remember the things, this is something where you're going to laugh at, where I remember I watched them get up, we wake up at 5:30 for sweep detail. Nice. And I remember going out and watching them do sweep detail, and I was like motivated by sweep detail.
Oh, you jumped in.
Oh, bro, I was so pumped. I'm like, oh my God, look at the discipline. They're in files, they're just moving with a purpose right now. This is going to be so cool.
They're sweeping so efficiently.
Yeah, seriously, it really was. I was like, wow, really, lo and behold, did I know they're just putting the dirt somewhere else. But that's you got to learn that through experience. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I remember we go downstairs. I remember they're doing their push-ups, and I'm watching. They scream at the end of their push-ups, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going here. Yeah, this is it. And so I remember going back, And my brother had a command period where he was getting a little too big for his britches with the administration, and the administration's like, oh well, watch this. So they moved him to, I think they moved him to Reggie staff or Bat staff, but they took his command away from him. So he had a really rough go of it, and he was pretty upset with that. And my mom didn't like that. She was not happy with the whole military thing. Like, this was like right in the middle of the Afghan-Iraq war, and so she's like, I'm not paying for you to go to college, was kind of the idea. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to join the Army then. And she's like, we can talk. All right.
A little negotiating power.
And that's when I learned to negotiate. Yeah, that was right. It was like, so we end up, and mom was, they decided, like, look, go through. You should understand what you're getting yourself into. If you're dead set on the military, then like this is probably a good place to at least get your feet underneath you and get a feel for it.
Yeah.
So she wanted me to apply to other colleges. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. Partly because I knew I was going to the Citadel, but the other part because I was like, I do not want to apply to other colleges. Yeah. That is a lot of work for a little gain.
Yeah.
So anyways, we go through. So that's how I found out about the Citadel.
Nice.
I finished up my senior year. I ended up doing wrestling for the first time.
Oh, nice. Senior year?
Senior year, yeah. And I was going to say, because I'm like, I need to get ready for the Citadel.
That helped you later, too?
Oh, 110.
You know
oh, my God. Oh, bro. It's on that moto engineer life. Didn't help me that much. It was very close. Very close. But yeah, dude, went in, did wrestling for the first time in my life as a 205-pound heavyweight. And didn't do too bad. I actually did all right. And I will say, I definitely think that, should I have boys that I'm like, they're definitely going to do some sort of combatants. And I'm like, wrestling was something that I could see how you need to do it voluntarily, but there's something really good there. The humility of it, where you're going to go out and it's like, I'm going against the person that I know is just going to make me look silly. And it's like, yes, they're going to physically dominate you, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's going to be